Hey, welcome back to my kitchen. My name is Shanae and today we're going to make lemon meringue pie. This effortlessly impressive pie is one of my favorites. As you can imagine, anything with meringue is my favorite, but this pie is so delicious with a layer of buttery, flaky pie crust and filled with bright and zesty, not overly sweet lemon curd filling and topped with cloud-like meringue topping. It's so delicious. And this recipe is pretty traditional, and I'm going to share with you 6 tips to make flawless pie every time. So let's get started. So for this recipe, I already pre-made my pie crust. I used my all butter homemade pie crust recipe. I already shared very in detail video for my pie crust before. If you haven't watched it, go check it out. And for this recipe, you want to prepare your pie crust blind baked, which means you fully cook it before you fill it. So I prepared it last night. You can make it in advance. You can always use store-bought pie crust, but in my opinion, homemade one always wins. And if you really don't want to deal with any pie crust, then you can also use graham cracker crust instead. For the filling, we will need lemon juice, water, sugar, egg yolks, cornstarch and flour, and a little bit salt. And at the end, we'll add butter. And for the meringue topping, we'll use egg whites, a little bit sugar, and cornstarch. So now let's get started. So first, we'll need to separate 4 egg whites. We want to be very careful not to break egg yolks, because you don't want any egg yolk in your egg whites. Otherwise, you won't be able to whip into a nice meringue. If you haven't watched my meringue 101 video, go ahead and watch it now, because I explained the science behind the meringue and why it's important not to have egg yolks or any kind of fat in your egg whites. So go ahead and watch it, and I'll go ahead and crack the egg whites now. So now we're gonna make the meringue. We'll start making the meringue, and then we'll move on to making the lemon curd. And I will explain to you why we are doing this way. And in order to make the meringue, we're mixing 1 tablespoon of cornstarch in sugar. The reason for the cornstarch is because lemon meringue pie tends to bead, which means there's like water droplet, like sugar syrups drops on top of the meringue, and that's called beading, and people don't like it. To me personally, it's not a huge issue, especially if you're storing it in the fridge. Eventually it will happen, but just to prevent that from happening sooner, we are adding cornstarch in our meringue. Cornstarch absorbs excess moisture from the meringue and will keep it nice and fresh for a longer time. Now, I'm going to start whisking the egg whites on medium-low speed until foamy, and I'll start adding sugar and cornstarch mixture 1 tablespoon at a time until it reaches soft peaks. Not hard peaks, but soft peaks, and I will show you what that means. So my meringue has reached soft peaks. Soft peaks is when you see this droopy peak, and we're not done with the meringue, but at this stage we're going to stop and then get started with the lemon curd. So tip number 1 is perfectly blind baked pie crust, and tip number 2 is add cornstarch in your meringue to prevent beading issue. And now we'll go ahead and make lemon curd, and I'll share with you some more tips. To make the lemon curd, we're going to add 1 cup of sugar into a saucepan, and into the saucepan we're going to add flour and cornstarch. 2 tablespoons of flour and 3 tablespoons of cornstarch, and a little bit salt, about 1/4 teaspoon. And then 1 cup of water and 1/2 cup of lemon juice. I juiced the lemons yesterday with my KitchenAid attachment, which I find pretty handy when, especially if you're juicing more than 3-4 lemons. And for half a cup of lemon juice, you will need about 2 to 3 lemons, depending on the size. But I was making more lemon juice than half a cup, so that's why I find my KitchenAid juicer attachment pretty handy. Now, we're going to bring this mixture over medium heat until it starts boiling. And make sure to whisk so that your dry ingredient starts incorporating. So here's the tip number 3. Cornstarch is our main thickening agent in the lemon curd, but we're also adding a little bit all-purpose flour. And the reason for that is because cornstarch activates when it starts boiling, and it loses its thickening ability if it's cooked for too long or over too high heat. If that happens, then what we're filling is not gonna set. So flour is also thickening agent. It's kind of an extra insurance in case the corn flour fails. There will be flour to thicken the lemon curd. You won't taste any flour in the curd. Don't worry about it, and it's going to be so delicious. I think it's worth the insurance. I've never tasted flour or anything because everything is cooked, and we just need to make sure to whisk it frequently because it will start boiling really quickly, and you don't want to burn anything on the bottom. You will start noticing around the edges a little bit thicker, translucent thickening happening, and that's where cornstarch is doing its job. So make sure just to whisk it to incorporate into the mixture. And while we're cooking this mixture, I'm going to zest 1 lemon. And make sure to zest only on the outer layer yellow part of the lemon, because if you go into the white pit, it's very bitter and you don't want that. Almost like brush 1 or 2 times, and you don't want to get to that white part. And if you're juicing your lemons, do zest first before you cut and start juicing it, because it's much easier to zest while it's whole lemon. And you don't want to zest it in advance because it will lose its potency as time goes. So you want to zest it as fresh as possible. And don't forget your mixture, keep stirring. As you can see, it's doing its job. It's getting kind of a translucent color. It doesn't take a long time to make lemon meringue pie, but requires a lot of multitasking. So you just need to be really quick and plan ahead and have all the ingredients and everything ready at your fingertips, because everything is going to be moving forward really fast. Set the lemon zest aside, and while the curd is coming to a boil, let's prepare your egg yolks. Basically wrap a wet rag, make a ring like so, and place your bowl on top, because we're going to add this boiling mixture into your egg yolks and vigorously whisk. This process is called tempering. We are tempering the egg yolks so that they slowly rise in the temperature, so that when we add it into this hot mixture, the egg yolks are not gonna get scrambled egg bits in your mixture. So to prevent that, we tempered the egg yolks. It's really easy process, nothing intimidating. Now, as you can see, my mixture is like thick and translucent, is almost boiling. As you can see, it bubbles up. And when that happens, we'll take this about half a cup of mixture we'll need to add, and vigorously mixing, add the mixture slowly. See how egg yolk is nice and smooth, exactly what we want. Now when we add this egg mixture into the curd, it's not gonna cook into scrambled egg. Now we're going to pour this mixture back into the curd mixture, and see how egg yolks add this nice, beautiful yellow color. And now we will cook this curd for about 3 to 5 minutes over medium heat until it's nice and thick. We do want to stir it frequently so that it doesn't burn on the bottom. If you feel like it's thickening too fast or boiling rapidly, you can decrease your heat to medium-low. Now, I haven't forgotten about the lemon zest. This is tip number 5. To get that bright and zesty lemon curd, we're going to add the lemon zest at the end of the cooking process because we want to preserve as much lemon flavor as possible so it doesn't cook down as much. And lemon zest is very, very important because it has the most lemon flavor than lemon juice. So keep that in mind. Don't omit this. I'm going to add my lemon zest. Now, about 1 minute prior to your curd to be done, go ahead and start whipping your meringue until stiff peaks. Add a little bit vanilla extract just for a little added flavor and whip it on medium-high speed until it stiff peaks form. Because we want to finish your curd and meringue at the very same time, and then we'll quickly assemble the pie, and I'll explain to you why. My lemon curd is ready, and I'm removing from heat and adding butter and stir it until it's melted. The butter makes this lemon curd super silky, smooth, and luxurious. It's so good. So while the butter is cooling, I'll show you the meringue. It's perfectly stiff peaks. Stiff peaks means this, and you don't want to whip it until too stiff. Like for my macarons, I go a little further than this, but for meringue, you don't want to go too far because it will be harder to shape it. So this is perfect consistency. Now the best part is to assemble the pie, and you want to be very, very quick because we're going to pour this hot lemon curd mixture into the pie crust, and immediately while it's piping hot, we're going to top it with meringue. And I'll explain to you why as soon as we get to that point, because I don't want to talk and do something and do it incorrectly, which I tend to do that. But I'm going to add the lemon meringue. Oh, smells so good. Okay, and immediately we're going to top it with meringue. I always find this part very tricky, but it works out. Put all the meringue on top first, and then we'll spread it. Gotta move quickly, so make sure to spread the meringue all the way to the edges, covering the meringue at the entirety, because we don't want any curd peeking out. Now, once all the curd is completely covered, we can go ahead and just shape your meringue into a fun design. It doesn't take a lot, you know, just I like it to go rustic and just create dips, or sometimes I go in smooth. I think it's good. If you do like smears like so, it looks prettier. Now let me explain why you want to hurry up and cover that hot lemon curd with the meringue. 2 reasons. One, you're locking in the heat, and that prevents the biggest lemon meringue pie issue, which is weeping. Weeping is when there's water pools on top of the lemon curd and on the bottom of your meringue, so between the 2 layers, and that's a not very appetizing thing in your pie. So in order to prevent that, you want to seal the curd right away. Another thing is, because we're making French meringue, it's not cooked. The heat from the curd will start cooking the meringue from the bottom, and then we're going to pop this into the oven for about 8 to 10 minutes at 375 degrees until the top is nice and toasted. And I'll show you when it comes out. Guys, here it is. Beautiful pie. Look at this beauty. Is it not pie perfection? It smells incredible too. I forgot to mention something about the meringue topping. We made French meringue, which is not cooked, and this is why it's really important to bake it in the oven for 8 to 10 minutes just to make sure the egg whites are safe to eat. But you can also make Swiss meringue or Italian meringue instead. And in that case, you don't have to cook the egg whites because it's already cooked. You can just simply use a kitchen torch to toast it on top. It looks really impressive, but I prefer French method because it's just so easy to make. And baking in an oven also makes it beautiful as well. Now, we're not ready to dive in just yet. And this brings us to our final tip. Tip number 6, we're going to let it set for at least 2 hours. This way your filling and pie cools down at room temperature completely, and the filling will hold its shape when you cut into it. If you cut into it right now, it will just ooze out and make a mess. So don't do that. I know it is the hardest part when you smell amazing pie and you just can't eat it. I made lemon meringue pie last night to show you how beautiful it is inside, and we'll taste test it together. Before we taste test, let me summarize 6 tips that I shared with you today. Tip number 1, make sure to blind bake your pie crust before you start. You can prepare this a day in advance, and I already shared all the tips in my pie crust recipe, so make sure to watch that. And it's really important to blind bake your pie crust, and it will prevent soggy crust. Tip number 2, we're using a little bit flour in our curd just as an extra insurance to make sure your filling is nice and thick and holds its shape. In case your cornstarch weakens during the cooking process, you will have a flour to be there as a backup. Tip number 3 is adding cornstarch in the meringue. This helps with absorbing excess moisture in the meringue and prevent beading issues. Tip number 4 is add your lemon zest at the end of the cooking the lemon curd to preserve that bright, zesty flavor of the lemons. Tip number 5 is to prevent weeping problem when there's a pool of water gathers between the lemon curd and meringue, and we don't want that. And in order to prevent that issue, you wanna pour your hot lemon curd into the pie shell and cover it with meringue as soon as possible while the curd is still hot. That way you're not only cooking your meringue from the bottom, you're also locking the heat, and your 2 layers are not gonna weep. Tip number 6 is let it set for at least 2 hours at room temperature before you dive in. Now let's go ahead and taste test this beautiful pie, shall we? So beautiful. See how the lemon curd is holding its shape perfectly, and mile-high meringue, it's so good. Oh, I can't wait to dive in. Thank God I made this pie yesterday. It was torture. My kids were like all over it. It was really a struggle to keep it untouched. The curd is not overly sweet, and there's a little bit tang from the lemon, and it's so perfect. By the way, it's really tricky to cut into a meringue pie, and I want to share with you a quick tip. I find this serrated knife helps with a nice clean cut. Use a gentle sewing motion at the top of the crust, and then once you get the nice clean cut, you can just go all the way in and cut it that way. Yeah, so serrated knife is key for that nice clean cut. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please let me know in the comments below. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, thank you for watching. Bye.